What is up, ladies and gentlemen? It's another beautiful Saturday morning with with Dan Moneyline Miller alongside my excellent handicapper Ray Greyfox. Ray, how you doing today, buddy?
Couldn't be better. We are into the meat of the final stretch, Dan. We've got the playoff poll has come out, the rankings, college football playoff rankings. We're getting into the nitty gritty now, so we're winding down. This is the back end of it, buddy.
Yeah, so we're the playoffs is right around the corner. Kind of, we got that first little glimpse about it, thing. What's your first thoughts about that, Ray? What's your thoughts on the 12-team playoff this year?
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and be the grumpy old guy everybody probably thinks I'm going to be and say it should be, 4 teams or it should be 2 teams. I'm excited about it. I think it opens a lot of doors for a lot of teams that honestly, their path was sort of limited, right? The Boise's of the world, the BYUs of the world, the SMUs, the Pitts. These are teams that they had very, very slim chances of making a 14 playoff. As it stands with 12 teams, a lot of teams still have hope in this thing. And, we can discuss some of those if you like, Dan, or, we can cover them as we cover the games. But I'm excited for it. I think it's added a new little twist that has generated a lot of excitement in the college game.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. My whole thing was I think it gives the smaller schools an opportunity to win one game, maybe not win the national championship just about yet, but it definitely gives you that one school an opportunity to win a game that they might as well, might not even be there for, So I think monetarily wise, it's going to be good for the schools. We're not going to see, I don't think, a massive upset come week, the first year. Obviously, we're not going to see Boise State or SMU, run the table and beat a Georgia for the national championship. Like, that's probably not going to happen this year. But we might see, a University of Miami going against a Boise State or something like that in the first round, and Boise State might catch an upset. So we might see some disparity there, but I don't think we're as far as to say we're going to see not a blue blood school to win a national championship this year. So I think that's we're yet to see that. But I think, again, it gives the lower schools an opportunity to maybe win a game that they might as well wouldn't have been there to begin with. So, Ray, let's start breaking down some games today. We have some games here. So Purdue at Ohio State. We have a Big Ten showdown. Purdue. There is no money line on Purdue on DraftKings, Ray, because they don't even think that they can win this game. So Ohio State, a minus 37.5-point favorite here, total 55. And Ray, in some spots, you can't even parlay the Ohio State and over because they won't even allow you to do that. It's not even a correlated parlay. So talk to me about this one, Ray. What 37.5, total 55 here.
Well, I mean, the opener here at 38.5. So I guess you could say early money came in on Purdue. I think that's just like a pity bet there. Just thinking that maybe the Ohio State will pull a lot of starters early in this game. They've obviously got the meat of what they're shooting for is down the line for Ohio State. Purdue has lost their last 10 in Columbus. So, again, I'm trying to shine any positive I can here, but this is a tough one. Visitor 5-6-1 against the spread recently. So a little hope for the cover of the big number here from Purdue. Ohio State does lead this series 41-15-2 all time. And I think where the biggest, where there's really, you kind of got to eliminate any hope for Purdue today. The Ohio State defense, 257 yards per game. The Purdue defense, 488.3. So they're facing probably the most potent offense that they've faced this year. Certainly one of the most acclaimed anyways. And again, just a note, I always only use stats versus 1A teams. So if anybody's looking at or any of the numbers I give, you may see different numbers if you're looking at a stat site that includes games versus 1AA or FCS opponents, as the cool kids say today. But all my numbers are generated versus 1A competition. So I feel like if you don't pull those stats out when an Ohio State plays a 1AA team, maybe to start the year, it can skew the numbers so far that just it makes them hard to come back to reality. You put up 600 or 700 yards against a small school, it's going to draw your average way above what it would be if you're using that for your ratings. So just keep that in mind whenever I do give numbers on games. Obviously, too big of a number for me to dive into. but oddly enough, my ratings have it right at 38. So certainly a sharp number there. The only hope you have here is that Ohio State jumps up early and that they could just get a bunch of kids in and, they don't necessarily run it up on Purdue. But, I mean, this game could be 56-0. I don't think anyone would be surprised, Dan.
And, yeah, I was going to bring up to the point where Ohio State might even get to the total by themselves. They might score 55 points themselves. So if you like the total, I mean, if you like Ohio State here, I think the smart play is just to play the total because you don't know, again, if the backups are going to come in for Ohio State when they're blowing them out in the third quarter, by 40 points. And then Purdue scores the one touchdown to not make you covering that game. So again, I think if you're going to lean this way, I think I'm listening to all of my great analysts during the week here, and they think Ohio State can name their score here. And I think that's why the total is the better bet because Ohio State's going to score, right, Ray? So
yeah.
Right. So you're just kind of banking on Purdue to at least score like one time this game, right? Like that's not too much to ask for. It's Purdue, right? I mean, let's back it up. It's Purdue. But I think if you're leaning this way, Ray, and you're leaning Ohio State, just play the over because Ohio State's going to score points, right? And you just really that's my lean, Ray. I think if you're going to play this way, you lean the over because both teams they're going to score, right? It's a football game, so. That's just my two halves on that one, Ray. Going on the next game, and I want to say thank you to everyone watching. Good morning to everyone. Thank you, Uncle Dave. Thank you, Mrs. Mama Miller, Papa Miller, the Greyfox family. Thank you all for listening. We really appreciate you every week to listen, and hope you continue to support us. Going on to the next game here, we have number 4 ranked Miami, Florida, going on the road to face Georgia Tech. Miami, Florida is a 10-point road favorite here, Ray. Total 64. Buyback on the Georgia Tech is plus 275. What do you like in this one?
Game opened at 12.5, Dan. So the money came in on Georgia Tech. I just watching game day just prior. I think I saw the Georgia Tech quarterback as a game time decision. So, Marquise, of course, Marquise is going to check in with his Go Canes. He loves it when you throw up the U. Marquise, Kevin, Yellowhammer, DB, Gnarly, and Marty Riggs. What is up? Thank you all for being here today. Again, game opened at 12.5. Georgia Tech is off the bye. The quarterback is a game time decision. At least that's what I saw on the ESPN show this morning. Miami 8-6 against the spread versus Georgia Tech since 2009. However, Georgia Tech has covered 5 of the last 6 against Miami. So for you Georgia Tech backers out there, again, with that quarterback being a game-time decision, I would definitely hold off on any plays you might make to see what that number does and what that decision is on the quarterback. Last year, you all obviously remember it was the Mario Cristobal sort of low moment of his time here at Miami. They could have kneeled on it to end the game against Georgia Tech. They ran a play. Miami fumbled. Georgia Tech got the ball back, ended up winning the game. Absolute low moment for Cristobal there. Obviously a learning moment for him, but there was just no sense to be made of that when he did that last year. Cristobal won't forget that either today. This is a Miami team currently sitting 4th in the college football playoff rankings. They're 9-0 on the season. Today's a big one for me, Dan. I have over 9.5 wins for Miami. That was my biggest preseason regular season win total bet that I made. So obviously I don't, 3 games to play. I just need them to grab one. They're not playing any ranked opponents. I'd rather they just get it done today, though. You don't want to see anything goofy happen where they drop one today and then they go on tilt a little bit. But again, the rest of their schedule indicates that this team is probably, they're 4th in the rankings right now, Dan, and it looks like that's basically due to the fact that they're one of the 3 unbeatens here on 4 unbeatens on the first page of the rankings in the top 10 anyways. And they certainly have the easiest path to an undefeated season, which would certainly get them into the dance. So no action for me here. The money has come in on Georgia Tech off the opener. No play for me, Dan.
Now, if you're backing Miami of Florida and you've done well, Ray, I'm not going to say you haven't been doing well. But when Duke was up 28-17, Pat Forty tweeted one time, he's still waiting for someone to explain to him why the Hurricanes were 20-point favorites, but the Blue Devils were his lock of the week. Well, unfortunately, that 28-17 didn't hold, and Miami went out and covered that game. So, to look at that, Ray, and say, Miami was down. They really had no business covering the game. I'm not going to say win the game because they had a whole another half to play. They really had no business covering the game. And shockingly enough, they do. So, I mean, if you're back in Florida, you have to feel good about yourself because they're going out there and they're putting their 100% effort in every single play. And, the point spread indicates that here with the 10-point spread. It's hard not to back them, Ray. Honestly, after that, come back last week, it's hard. It's a hard pill to stomach for someone who had Duke last week, honestly. So on to the next one we have here, Ray. We have, one second, Florida on the road to face Texas. Texas is a 21.5 point favorite here. Total 48.5. Buyback on the Gators here is 12-1 here, Ray. What do you like in this one?
Florida, Texas game opened at 22, dipped just below that currently, as Dan mentioned, 21.5. Texas off the bye here. Before we get into this game, did want to mention you brought up the great Pat Forty. Not many really good sports writers, to be quite honest with you, left in America. This used to be, if you grew up like me reading newspapers, you couldn't wait for certain articles to come out. The Sports Illustrated writers were absolutely fantastic when I was young. Now it's sort of more clickbait, right? Every article you see is trying to stir something up, trying to get a coach fired, try to get sentiment against the coach, trying to drive their own agenda. I feel like a lot of sports reporters today, they want to be the story instead of reporting or finding a good story. There's tons of good stories out there. And, it seems like they neglect what are the really good stories to jump into sort of the mire a little bit and create the story. Pat Forty, one of the great sports writers left in America. And if you did have that Duke ticket, obviously you'd be pretty sour. But they pulled this twice now. They pulled it with Cal also earlier in the year where they trailed by 3 scores in the fourth quarter. That says a lot about this Miami team. I get it. They're not beating the best schedule. They're not in the SEC. I understand. I mean, we all see who they're playing, but they're getting the job done. And they're not folding when they're behind. So Cristobal obviously has that team in a good place. So Florida, Texas. Texas is off the bye here for you off bye backers. Again, the number 21.5 here this morning. First SEC meeting between the two as Texas has just joined the SEC. Last time here, no recent history here, Dan, 1939, pre-World War II. So Florida 6-15 against the spread on the road since 2021. Again, 6-15. When they talk about Florida's home field advantage in the swamp, obviously they're struggling big time recently on the road. That's probably why you hear the rumblings around Napier. I think this week I saw an article where they're maybe getting behind Napier. That quarterback's tied to the hip to him, DJ Lagway. He was secured by Napier to come to Florida. So there's certainly a sentiment among donors and alumni that, if they can, Napier, Lagway goes down the road. They certainly don't want to see that. He's starting and winning games as a true freshman. Florida's last win versus a ranked team on the road, 2018, Dan, Mississippi State. Texas, 16-8 against the spread at home under current coach Steve Sarkisian. So, again, this number, I've got this number aligned about where it's at on a neutral. So, if you're looking at a little home field edge, I think that it's a lean here with Texas. I just think, Florida outside the swamp, a little bit outgunned here. This Texas team, they sit at 5th right now, 7-1. This is a scary team. They've got crazy quarterback depth. We all know that. Manning, Arch Manning's not sitting on the bench in probably any other team in the country, if we're just being honest.
Yeah.
I think these are the two teams that are kind of standing out to me. This Oregon team, they don't seem to have any let up either. This is the kind of game Texas really should just get out and get on top of them early. Look for Florida to pull out all the stops here, probably see some trick plays. They're going to go to everything they have in the bag. For me, a no bet, but if it were, my numbers suggest Texas is a little bit better than Florida by a touch more than the number, Dan.
Yeah, and like you said, Ray, I think the Texas team, Texas Longhorns, have honestly the best quarterback depth in the country. We have Quinn Ewers starting, and then you got Arch Manning in the back, who I feel like they're not even afraid to substitute him for Ewers whenever they need to. So, honestly, yeah. I think Texas might be able to name their score here, like you said. So, Yeah, I'm not, no bet for me, honestly, but I think Texas kind of shows them, who's boss here. Next game we have on the dock is number 3, right? An SEC battle here, Ray. Number 3 ranked Georgia on the road to face number 16th ranked Ole Miss. Georgia is a 2-point favorite here. Total 54.5. Buyback on the Ole Miss is plus 110. Do we think we see a shootout here in this game, Ray?
Yeah, I don't necessarily see that as much as I feel like that if I leaned anywhere on the total, Dan, it might be to the under actually in this game.
Okay, all right.
Oddly enough, what I'm seeing is that I saw this game open at 3.5. I can't remember if that was offshore or DK here in Virginia. The books are all saying that they need Ole Miss, but the number's moving the other direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it started at 3.5. It's down to 2 now. So that's telling me, in any other world, that means Mississippi's taking money here. No, am I missing something here?
No.
But all the tweets I saw this morning were from, some of the accounts that I follow are they'll release what the most tickets, the most bets. Again, I caution you on that when you're looking at that stuff. Do so with a grain of salt. What one book needs, another book might not. It's just, if you went before booking, books were legal statewide, in-state, DraftKings, MGM, that kind of thing. If you contacted a bookmaker, I promise you, in Atlanta today, I know who he needs. And if I contacted one in the state of Mississippi, I know who he needs. So
Exactly.
be careful when you dive into that stuff. But this one, a little curious to me, as all the books are saying they need Ole Miss, but the line's steadily coming down. Ole Miss's rating is much higher than Georgia's this year. Georgia's is starting to tick up. Not in their plus 20 and above where they've been in my ratings, but they're coming up from 6 to a 9 to an 11. I think the quarterback play, oddly enough, we didn't expect to say that going into this year, that the quarterback play at any point would be an issue with a veteran coming back for Georgia. But he's thrown like 12 picks in his last 4 games. He throws it to the other team and seems to do so early, putting the dogs in a hole to start games out. This Mississippi team is going to be a tough test if he does do that. I don't think Georgia can afford to turn the ball over here on the road at Ole Miss in the Grove there and win. Last year, Georgia 52, Mississippi 17. Georgia was a 10.5-point favorite. Again, that Georgia team in my ratings was about 2.5 times better than this current Georgia team is, current edition. Georgia is 11-2 recently against the spread in their road finale. They will be back in Athens for the remainder of the season after today's road trip to Ole Miss. Mississippi 1-11 straight up, 4-8 against the spread versus Georgia. So again, the recent trend, 1-11 straight up against Georgia. It's easy to see why I guess the Georgia, why people will be back in Georgia in this one. They are certainly more accomplished in the big games, right? Mississippi sort of finding their way this year via the portal, some NIL investment. This is not your uncle's Ole Miss team, I guess is what I'm trying to say. This is sort of the highest, flashiest Ole Miss team we've seen in a while. And they've had some really high-rated teams in my ratings. It's one of the teams that in recent years my ratings kind of fall in love with, and they always seem to let down at the wrong time. Mississippi has lost their last 11, Dan, versus top 5 teams. So, my numbers say that it's Ole Miss or nothing here. The quarterback play for Georgia tells me it's Ole Miss or nothing here. It's just going to be a matter of does big game experience come into play, right? Because Georgia just plays these type of games every year, multiple games against Alabama in recent years. They're certainly battle tested in regards to big games. This would be the biggest one, I think, that Ole Miss has hosted. I hate to say that, but in a while, I believe. So for me, I did not bet the game, but it's an Ole Miss lean for me here. I can't. Luckily, I'm the only one in the house right now, Dan, or somebody be throwing something at me. As again, my wife is a UGA alum. My kids are born in Georgia. You don't say Ole Miss in this house. You don't say Alabama, and God forbid, Dan, you don't say Tennessee if you want to eat. Okay, if you want to eat in this house and you walk in an orange jersey, Mrs. Fox is not feeding you.
You're going hungry.
You're going hungry, exactly. So Ole Miss lean for me here, nothing, Dan. But again, big game experience, I think, is going to be a big factor in this one today. Should be a really fun game to watch. I think it's at 3:30, bud.
Yes, it is at 3:30 EST. And I just want to point out, right, to your point last about the quarterback play. Carson Beck threw 3 interceptions last game against Florida. And however, at halftime, they were losing 13-6 to Florida. And guess what? the Florida quarterback went out with an injury, and then they pretty much, that was it. And Georgia scored 28 points in the second half when Florida could only manage 7, and Georgia winded up beating them 34-20. So, Georgia kind of has gotten lucky in a sense. So I'm with you there, with Carson Beck really not proving that he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, throwing a lot of interceptions. I think you can, comfortably say that maybe Ole Miss is the right side here. That's just my, 2 cents there. On the next one, Ray, here also at 3:30 EST, we have Michigan, your defending national championships, who are probably not going to be in the college football playoff this year. Michigan on the road to face Indiana. Indiana is a 14.5-point favorite. That's 2 touchdowns plus the hook. Total 48 here. Buyback on the Wolverines is plus 470. What do you like in this one, Ray?
So this one's interesting. Somebody posted some gaudy Indiana numbers on the X there, the Twitter. And of course I commented. I think it was like one of the stat sites that they posted it. So it was an independent stat site, PFF or somebody like that was saying, "Oh, look at all these awesome offensive numbers for Indiana." And I'm like, I just had to comment, look at the schedule. Look at who they've accumulated those numbers against. We talk about this all the time, rate the rating. If we're just rating Indiana off what they've done this year, sure, they're the best team. We could say they're the best team in college football, but they're not, and we all know that. So, of course, the Hoosier Nation came after me like a bunch of wild dogs in the streets of a third world country and tried to chew my legs off. And I'm like, look, I see your screen name, Hoosier Daddy. I see your screen name, Hoosier for life. Okay, I get it. I'm not a Michigan guy. I'm not even a Big Ten guy. I don't care. I'm just trying to say your squad has accumulated these numbers against a terribly soft schedule. Then they immediately come back at me, Dan, with, well, Michigan had the same schedule last year. Yeah, but Michigan beat Ohio State. You guys haven't played them yet. Once you beat Ohio State, then we're going to listen to these numbers a lot more. Ratings here say this number should be way higher, but again, rate the rating. Is Indiana really a plus 18.5 as they are in my ratings? No, I've got to dial that back based on who they played. They're not playing that high level competition. This would be a game preseason, certainly, that we would have circled. I promise you, if you bet this or whatever the early number was in July and August when they post their games of the year, I can promise you Indiana was not 12.5, 13.5, or 14.5. Yeah. This is a game that if you bought Indiana in the game of the year lines, you would have gotten them as obviously as a plus money dog. Tremendous football coach. Let's be honest about that. Cignetti is an outstanding, great football coach, and he is pulling the most out of Indiana that can be pulled. But again, historical brackets, he's still getting players that slot into Indiana. We all know that if you're outside the state of Indiana and you're being recruited, and Ohio State calls, and Michigan calls, and Penn State calls, and Indiana calls, who are you going to say yes to out of those? Indiana's going to be the fourth choice if you're not from Indiana. So you're still getting that bracket of recruits. But again, Cignetti milking the absolute most out of this Hoosier team. Home team here has covered the last 4, Dan. And again, for this game to be a double-digit Indiana favorite, I had it opening 12.5, and I think it went up to 14.5 at one point. Michigan is 42-2 against Indiana since 1968. 56 years, they're 42-2 straight up against Indiana. Last year, again, when we talk about Michigan had the same similar schedule as Indiana last year, they did. And Michigan was a 33-point favorite against Indiana. 33. Indiana, now playing the weakened version of Michigan, is not a 33-point favorite, indicating that, again, let's not start comparing this year's Indiana to last year's Michigan. It's fool's fodder. They were outgained last year 407-232 in a 52-7 loss to the Wolverines. The Indiana defense does come into this game a little better. They're only allowing just under 280 yards. Michigan, oddly, 345 yards. I think if anything this year, most of us expected Michigan's defense to still be sort of, I don't want to say championship caliber, but certainly much better than 345 yards a game. Last year's defense, again, was even better than this current version of Indiana's. High number here for me. But again, the rating suggests it could be even higher. I think that's why we saw it go from 12.5 to 14.5 on the opener. No play for me here. Hey, for you Hoosier Nation folks out there, I'm rooting for you today. So that makes you stop coming at me on Twitter. But, simply put, your team just hasn't compiled those stats against a quality schedule. You would be, and I looked at this. This was another reply I had to the Hoosier faithful that came at me with torches. Tennessee, Penn State, Texas, Miami, Georgia, Ohio State, and Oregon, all the 7 teams in front of Indiana in the current college football playoff rankings. They are a dog to every one. Every one of those teams on a neutral, you're a dog. I'm sorry. I hate to say that to you, Indiana, but you are. So it's all road to hoe. Indiana, great season, great coach, great story. I don't think they have the horses to compete with anybody in the top echelon of college football right now. This is sort of an apex rating for Indiana. Love to see them beat Michigan today, but I don't think that Michigan's going to lay over and die for them here. So they better come prepared and not be in a flat spot, or Michigan will give them a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, right. One of the handicappers that I really respect, his name is Wes Reynolds. He's an Indiana alumni, and he's been on them a lot this year. But he's also not afraid to say, you know what, I think this is not the best spot for him. So he's very good at picking spots. And again, he thinks this might be another line that's a little too big, like you said, for Indiana Hoosiers. So going on the next game, Ray, we have one of my favorite preseason teams who have not panned out really well. Iowa State on the road to face the Kansas Jayhawks. Iowa State is a 2.5-point favorite here, total 51.5. Buyback of the Jayhawks is plus 110. Can Jalen Daniels not throw an interception this time and throw the game away? Talk to me about this one.
This Kansas team was another team that had a lot of hope. It wasn't just you, Dan, that was really high on this team with their quarterback situation. Hasn't panned out, unfortunately. This is another one. My ratings are very high on Iowa State. They've let me down once this year. But again, they're sitting right now at 17th, at 7-1 in the rankings. This is still a team that could go dancing for sure. These are the kind of games that are going to determine that for them. You can't go on the road and lose to this Kansas team that I have rated right around a 0 in my ratings, which is like, it kind of says what it says, right? With your top echelon teams usually at plus 20 and above. Anybody with a negative rating is obviously not even remotely a contender. So this is a game that Iowa State, in order to sort of pave their road, they do have a path to the playoffs. This is the kind of game that they need to win, and unfortunately they need to do so convincingly. For those of you unaware, Kansas is not playing any true home games this year. They're playing at a couple of different stadiums. This one today being played in Arrowhead, home of the Chiefs, as they do renovations to David Booth, Kansas Memorial Stadium. Got all that out. So renovations forcing this game to a neutral. All their games, again, are split between 2 stadiums. This is one of them. Kansas is off the bye. So if that, for you off bye backers, there's your hope for Kansas. So Iowa State went on an 11-1 straight-up run from 2010 to 2021 against Kansas. However, Iowa State then has lost the last 2 in this series. 2009, last time that Kansas was favored. They, again, are not today. Game opened Iowa State 3.5. KU did pull the outright upset the last 2 years. So, again, if you're looking for any reasons to back them, recent history, Kansas has done so. Obviously, if they can, I don't know if they get a big enough crowd to fill Arrowhead Stadium. I'd be kind of shocked, quite frankly, if they did. It'd be nice to see Kansas hang in there. I think Iowa State's clearly the better team in this game. Did not back them. They've sort of they just haven't been impressing me lately as much as their number indicates. And they're another team whose number is beginning to come down a little bit. Stayed away from this one. I've been on Iowa State. They've done me pretty good this year. Did not dip my toe in the water here. The lean, though, is to Iowa State here on the road.
Yeah, just like to your point, this is being played in Arrowhead, and a lot of Iowa State fans are supposed to be in attendance today. So it's supposed to be like pretty close to 50-50, I would say. So no real home field advantage to Kansas, obviously. So a lot of people I do respect that are back in Kansas here. And I'm like, wait, have you been watching this team the whole year? Because I have. And they just break your heart. So I can't back them. I told you a couple weeks ago that if they lose one more game, and I'm out. So I'm out. I'm just going to watch them and hope for the best. But I can't stomach the 2.5. And because I just think that they're one bad interception away from throwing the game and they can lose by 7. So on the next one right here, we have Clemson on the road to face Georgia. Clemson, a 6-point favorite here, total 53.5. Buyback on Virginia Tech is plus 190. Talk to me about this one.
Oh, this one I saw open at 6.5. Clemson at Virginia Tech. This game was put on a 6-day TV hold last week with the hopes for everyone in Blacksburg, anyways, of Virginia Tech winning, Clemson winning. This would have been the classic Saturday night 7:30 start in Blacksburg. The Enter Sandman would have been twice as amped. It doesn't hit the same when the sun's shining. That's probably because people have not imbibed as much as they do for the 7:30 starts. Honestly, surprised this game didn't get bumped to the noon slot, as a ton of steam was taken out of this ball game. Clemson all the way down to 23rd in the playoff rankings at 6-2. I mean, I guess there's a path. They could somehow maybe find a way to get to the ACC title game. Tech really now, their only aspirations, a huge letdown for them this year. This was a team with like 20 returning starters, returning quarterback that was highly rated, highly touted, and they just have not performed under Brent Pry at all this year. A couple of shout outs to some alum. One is a good friend, Will Proctor, former quarterback for Clemson, who when he was there went off to a blazing hot start. Was one of the, I think, two Clemson quarterbacks to beat Florida State at Florida State in their time in the ACC. He did that, and he came to a little place called Lane Stadium in Blacksburg. I believe his Tigers at that point in that year were 6-0. They lost to Virginia Tech. The next week, they had an extra point to beat BC with Matty Ice Ryan at the helm, and they lost that one, and Clemson's hopes fell apart. The great Sidney Snell. Heavenly shout out to Sydney, a great friend of my son. Probably one of the best athletes ever to play Virginia sports, quite frankly. He had more points per game than Allen Iverson in basketball, and he was basically a three-sport All-American. Had offers to play basketball for North Carolina with Jordan and Worthy. Ended up playing his football here after his father passed away. He has a handful of sisters and his mother. He stayed home to play that man of the house role as much as he could as a college player. And the cool tie into this game is the last time Clemson won a natty title before Dabo was there was when Refrigerator Perry was at Clemson. VT played him. Sidney found the game tape. He scored running over Fridge Perry at the goal line, and the refs said no dice. They did not give it to him. Clemson went on to win that game. Clemson went on to win the natty. I think it was 1980. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it was 1980. So a couple of shout outs to a couple of amazing alums from those schools. Clemson 6-0 straight up, 5-1 against the spread since 2011 versus the Hokies. Clemson has beaten VT twice in the ACC title game, 2011 and 2016. Clemson leads the series all time, Dan, 23-12-1. Virginia Tech, however, beware of them as a home dog. This started under Beamer. It's continued now all the way through Pry. They're 11-6 as a home dog of late with 8 outright upsets since 2006. Is it going to shock me today if Virginia Tech pulls off the outright upset? Not in the least. Very poor effort from Virginia Tech last week. They blew a decent-sized lead on the road. So they should be pretty hyped up for this game. I think Drones and Tootin were both out last week for Tech. From what I understand, they'll both play today. We'll see. Can Dabo keep this Clemson team together? Right? I mean, at 23rd in the playoff rankings at 6-2, it's a sort of a teetering point for these Clemson Tigers. And the Sharks have been circling Dabo and his not lack of desire to use the portal. Still trying to build teams the old way. I don't mind that, but again, you can only live on past results for so long. Eventually, like I said, the Sharks there's blood in the water. The Sharks can smell it. This is a kind of loss that I think really could push things in a bad direction for Clemson and Swinney. Didn't bet the game, but if I were, and believe me, it's not a hometown hedge here, but Virginia Tech at home, if they get that place packed, they get a little noise in there just over Brush Mountain from me here, they could make some noise today against Clemson if fully healthy, Dan. Yeah,
I can't disagree with you. Any points they've made there, Ray. I think Virginia Tech can give Clemson a run for their money. So I'll be playing Virginia Tech, Ray. Colorado on the road to face Texas Tech, 20th ranked Colorado. They are a 4.5-point favorite here. Buyback of a Texas Tech Red Raiders is plus 164 on DraftKings. Total here is 62.5. are we going to be seeing some watching today, Ray? What are we doing?
So this one I did bet, Dan. I grabbed the opener on Colorado at 3, and I was even fine with it at 3.5 at 4. Quite frankly, I think the biggest challenge in this game for Colorado, can that offensive line? They are off a bye. Can they contain a pretty violent Texas Tech front? That's been the main issue for Colorado. If they play a team with a very good defensive front, that's kind of how you get under their skin, right? Is just constantly harassing Shedeur. He's an amazing quarterback. He is in the conversations. He's justly in the conversations that he is in for Player of the Year, Heisman Trophy, and such. They've got a ton of talent. This Colorado team. I think I saw them talking about their playoff chances on game day this morning. I think that the conversation is there. Where do they sit at currently? It looks like 20th 6-2. So again, there's not much wiggle room. I mean, I get it. 12 teams are getting in, but as you start to whittle down this list, I mean, if you're down there in that 15 to 20 area, you've pretty much got to run the slate, right? You can't no wiggle room for a loss here for anyone outside of the 12, quite frankly. So anyone, I think 10 to 15. If you look at most of those teams, they're mostly 2-loss teams. There's a couple. Boise's a 7-1 team. SMU's an 8-1 team. Iowa State and Pitt are 7-1. Washington State actually is a dark horse on the outside, 7-1 football team. So no room to wiggle here for Colorado. I'd say championship aspirations will die with any loss, but they'll be favored in every game for the rest of the season. And they're, in my ratings, have them as a fairly priced game, but I just think Colorado, in the situation that they're in, they know they've got to run the slate. This is big for Dion if he can take this team from one win, or I think they had one win the year before he came. I think he had 4 last year. I mean, to take this team to a 10-2 season really validates what he's done there. So I think a lot is on the line for Colorado in this game, and I think they have the type of players that respond to that. Not every team has players and coaches that like when that light shines brightest. Colorado is one of those teams that, from the head coach on down to the last player on the team, they like it in the bright lights. 11th meeting between these two, Dan. The one thing odd about this Texas Tech team that I find really, really odd, Texas Tech head coach Joey McGuire, 0 college playing experience, 0 head coaching experience. I mean, I don't know how many times that's happened. Maybe back in the day. I mean, just to not have played at all, and then his first head coaching job is at Texas Tech. That's a pretty good job. I mean, they got some guys there. It's not like normally a guy will come up, incarnate word, then maybe he'll get an assistant's job at a higher level, then a coordinator, then advanced. I mean, this is for a guy to have 0 playing experience and 0 prior head coaching experience to get a head job at a Texas Tech type school. It speaks a lot of what they think about him. Again, 11th meeting, but it's split so far, Dan. 5-5 is the series record. Texas Tech is on a 9-3 run in home Big 12 games. Expect to see an electric atmosphere today there. But again, I think when the lights shine their brightest, this Colorado team knows how to respond, knows what's at stake, and their head coach obviously is going to have them primed for this one today. I bought the low number on the opener. Have no issue with 4.5. I think if Colorado does this today, they'll get it done in good fashion.
Yeah, Colorado coming off the bye again, like you said. So that's another angle there. And let's talk about the Heisman quick, Ray. My boy Travis Hunter, plus 210 to win the Heisman, right behind Miami, Florida quarterback Cam Ward, plus 200. The next available person is your Oregon quarterback and Dylan Gabriel at plus 300. I grabbed 18-1 here on this kid. Again, it's the same conversation we're going to have each and every week, is if this guy continues to go out there and make game-changing plays on both sides of the field, how can you really not give him the Heisman? I mean, it's a quarterback, award, and Matty Riggs, Hunter's not winning anything. Look, he's plus 210 for a reason here, Marty. I mean, it's not like has no chance of winning. If he continues to go out there and continues to make game-changing plays, I really do believe that he has a great chance of winning this award. And look, Cam Ward almost blew it last week, ladies and gentlemen, right? It's not like he's perfect. And again, Miami really has to run the table here for him to win this award. So I'm just posting that bubble, Ray. I really want Travis Hunter 18-1 to be become your Heisman, because it's a great ticket, I think, and you have a shot to win. And I think if Colorado continues to play well, like you said, they have a chance to be maybe in this college football playoff if they run the table. So again, we don't know, and a lot to tell here. So just again, I'm all rooting for it, Ray. So if you have those tickets, please share them with at Moneyline Miller, at Ray Greyfox on Twitter. We'd love to see their tickets. So I have 18-1. If anyone has anything better or any tickets, please share. NukeTheHouse.com. Also, please head over there if you want to get your free trial and anything. Nuke November for 1 week free trial. Please share and subscribe us on YouTube, on X. It really helps us out. We love you, and we love all the comments here in our stream too. So keep commenting, keep engaging with us. So we love that. Next game we have right here is South Carolina on the road to face Vanderbilt. South Carolina, the Gamecocks are 6-point favorite here. Total 45.5. Buyback on the Commodores is plus 180. Talk to me about this one.
So this one again, these are two teams that obviously perform better in a dog role. South Carolina performs very well in a home dog role. We've seen that firsthand this year. South Carolina having won their last 7 in Nashville against Vandy. So no stranger to winning at Vandy is South Carolina. They have also won 15 straight. Average winning margin by 14 points per game. Vandy 1-8 against the spread versus South Carolina since 2015. This is a different Vandy team. I mean, we've seen it. They pulled –
Did we lose you, Ray? We might have lost you.
At least I will say I did not see it. I didn't see it coming. This team going into 2024, Vandy was 0-12 straight up versus ranked teams with an average margin of loss by 34.1 points per game. So I don't know who. Somebody will probably say they saw this coming. I will say this: the head coach is very good at Vanderbilt. There is a new vibe in Vanderbilt. I think it's almost like they're tired of being the SEC's doormat. This would be a big pickup for Vandy if they could knock off South Carolina. Would it shock me? None whatsoever. Again, South Carolina is a team I like to take when they're at home as a dog. That they overperform in that role, not so much so in a road favorite role, something that they're quite frankly not accustomed to, Dan. For me, it's a no play, but it would be a Vandy lean for me with the points at home.
I mean, with Vanderbilt being such a surprise this year, I mean, I can't not back them. But again, like you said, all good points there, Ray. Going on the next game here, we have a couple rapid fire ones here, Ray. Maryland on the road to face Oregon. We have Oregon a 23.5 point favorite here, total 58. Buyback on the Terrapins is 13-1. Talk to me. Do you like this one?
Money coming in on Maryland, Dan. Oregon opened at 25. I have the number, kind of closer to where it's at now. Oregon at home should be about a 3-touchdown favorite, maybe a touch more, which they are at 23.5. Only benefit here for Maryland, they are coming off the bye. This is the first meeting between the two, and Maryland's first trip to the West Coast since the 2014 Foster Farms Bowl. So Maryland, again, we're starting to get to that point where it's odd enough that a team that's basically on the Eastern Shore plays in the Big Ten. Now we've got a couple of them playing in the Big Ten. But now we're going coast to coast with that, with Maryland traveling west. Again, their first trip out there since 2014. Oregon 21-0 straight up as a conference fave versus unranked teams. 21-0 straight up as a conference fave versus unranked teams. Maryland defense here is the Achilles heel for them. 403.7 yards they're giving up. Oregon giving up 303.9. This Oregon team, it's like, you kind of feel like there's no numbers too high for them. Again, you mentioned that their quarterback I think is probably the biggest threat to the 18-1 ticket that you have. If this Oregon team just continues to steamroll people and they end up with one of those 4 buys, it's going to be very hard to not take a look at him, And again, it would be decisive if Colorado doesn't win out. I think I don't care what anyone says, 18-1, you absolutely robbed the bank there, win, lose, or draw. I mean, that's pretty evident when you're looking at 2-1 now. That was a fantastic play. I honestly believe that's the biggest threat. I mean, I think Genty for Boise certainly will have a case. They're 7-1. If Boise wins out, that's another team that could end up, but they've got to get in, right? I mean, they don't have a clear path to get in like Oregon does, Colorado does. For me here, I can't. I mean, I love that Maryland's off a bye. You like to think they'll have a bag of tricks ready for Oregon. I hope that they do, because they're going to need it with a defense that allows over 400 yards per game. This Oregon offense is absolutely steaming right now. Just double checking my paperwork, but 465.1 yards per game for Oregon against Division I opponents. This is a no bet for me, but it'd be Oregon or nothing. I would have to lean fairly strongly toward Oregon in this. They've had no issue covering big numbers so far.
I'm on your end, Ray. I think Oregon can name their score whenever they really want to. And, obviously the bookmakers think this is another one of those games. And I wouldn't touch Maryland if you paid me to. So next game we have is Mississippi State on the road to face Tennessee. Tennessee is a 25.5-point favorite here. Total 62. Buyback on Mississippi State, 13-1. Anything here, Ray?
No, number's gone up. Folks are betting Tennessee. Opened at 24. If you grab that, you got a good number. I had this game at about the number on a neutral. So this Mississippi State team is not very good. There's honestly, I don't see any signs of life that show me today will be different. Traveling to a very, very tough venue in Knoxville. Huge venue, Neyland Stadium, 100 million people are going to be at this game. Tennessee, of course, is sitting at 7th at 7-1 in the SEC. This is a game, again, Tennessee, to make their path to the playoff, got to hammer teams like this. They've shown that they're willing to do that. 29-16-1 series lead for Tennessee here. They have won 7 of the last 8 against the Bulldogs. Tennessee 22-1 straight up as a home fave under Josh Heupel. So again, we talk about roles teams are comfortable with. This Tennessee team is certainly comfortable as a home fave under Heupel. Mississippi State has lost their last 5 in Knoxville by an average of 24 points per game. Pretty ironic considering the number opened at exactly 24. And they're 1-4 in those last 5 in Knoxville against the spread. Again, if you gave me your money, I wouldn't bet it on Mississippi State, Dan. Number is the only thing in question here, but Tennessee, like Oregon, has shown no issue covering big numbers against inferior teams. And then this is a stretch of the season when you're sitting at 7th and you're looking to play in an SEC title game like Tennessee is. This is the kind of game you get it done. You get it done early and often, and you cover a big number.
Yeah, I'll agree, Ray. I wouldn't touch Mississippi State with a 10-foot pole here. On the next one here, we have Florida State. Is another team I don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. Florida State on the road to face Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a 25-point favorite here, total 43.5. And again, this is probably another one of those games where you cannot parlay Notre Dame with any total. You have to play either or side. Buyback on Florida State is 17-1. Anything here, Ray?
Nothing for me. Again, another game. Notre Dame off the bye. If you're looking at that, game opened at 24, went to 26, back at 25, as Dan mentioned, sitting right on where my ratings indicated should. This Florida State team, we kept thinking they were going to. It was a bit of an anomaly of a start. It's really turned into what they are. They are what we thought they were, quite frankly. When they were losing those games early on, they haven't really beaten any quality teams this year to give us any signs of hope that they would do so today on the road against the Notre Dame defense that is 100 yards better per game than the FSU defense. FSU has won their last 3 road finales. This will be their last road game this year. They will return back to Tallahassee for the remainder. They have done so also straight up and against the spread. FSU 6-5 in the series lead. Notre Dame won the last 3. Notre Dame head coach Freeman in his 3rd year. Again, 26-9. This guy's he's got to make something happen. I kind of feel like at Notre Dame, they don't have a whole lot of tolerance for a hootenanny, so to speak. They are currently sitting at 10th in the college football recently released rankings, 7-1 record. The defense, I think, is way too much for an anemic Florida State offense to put up any points today. They do get the bye week. Hopefully keep them focused on what could have obviously been oddly, you wouldn't have expected it preseason again. If you bought this game of the year number, I guarantee it was much different from what it is today. Mm-hmm. This is the kind of game sitting 10th in the playoff rankings. You're playing a far inferior team. Your defense should pretty much limit them. I can see the downside of this game being a 17-0 Florida State or Notre Dame win, but I feel like Notre Dame here, it's Notre Dame or nothing for me, Dan.
Yeah, again, I'm not touching Florida State with a 10-foot pole because they're 1-8 for a reason. I'm pretty sure they're 1-8 ATS or straight up or ATS. I'm sorry. On to the next game, Ray, because this one is one of the key games of the week. We have Alabama going on the road to face LSU. Alabama is a 2.5-point favorite. It was 3, I'm pretty sure, early in the week. Now at 2.5. DraftKings -115 shaded to the Alabama side. Total 58.5 here. Buyback on the Tigers is +120. Ray, I kind of like the money line on LSU here. Talk me out of that.
No, I don't think I will. Quite frankly, I don't think I'll even try to. This game is, I believe, a night game down there in Baton Rouge. Yep. That's the spot that you take LSU. We've seen them in other spots not look nearly as bright as they do. Very, very tough place to win a night game at. I do have Alabama rated a bit higher than LSU here, but to me, this game should have been a pick, is what I would have had the game at. So I'd obviously lean with anybody getting anywhere close to a field goal here. LSU also has the advantage of being off a bye, and they're playing a very familiar opponent. This is the old what we would call an SEC West decider. This would be the type of game generally that would decide who would go represent the West in the SEC championship. No longer have divisions in the SEC or any of the major conferences for that reason, because of the new playoff system. Alabama lost here in the last appearance in 2022. That was a 32-31 thriller, Dan. Prior to 22, Alabama had won 5 straight in Baton Rouge. But again, folks, that's Nick Saban. That's not the current head coach that came over from Washington. That is a Nick Saban stat. LSU 5-7 against the spread versus Bama since 2012. And last year, quarterback Daniels, the one playing for the Commanders now for Washington, was hurt. Nussmeier had 53 yards passing. Bama exploited that to a 42-28 win. And again, that game was in Alabama. So to me, it's an LSU or nothing play here. Alabama is another team like Georgia. They're starting to climb my ratings. They were at 6 and they're at 9. Now they're close to 13. They may be starting to gain a little steam if that's possible. But again, if we look at where they're at, 11 currently in the college football rankings at 6-2 overall. No wiggle room for Alabama. I do not think a 3-loss Alabama team gets in. Now, again, we can grade those losses all you want, and I get it that they are what they are, but I think Alabama needs to win out, quite frankly, to get where they want to get to. I like LSU in the points here because, as I said, I feel like this game should be a pick 'em in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm leaning all the way towards LSU here. And like you said, Alabama, if they lose 3 games, personally, I don't think the committee will hesitate to leave them out because of all their recency of being in there for so long. And they're like, you know what, this year they could just, take a hike. So I think you're right. If Alabama loses 3, the committee's going to have a hard time putting them in against all these other teams. Just because of all their recency bias, like, you know what, let's give another team a chance. Like, that's kind of human nature in a sense. But I mean, again, I'm not in the committee, so I can't tell you. But I personally think that, with all the recency bias of Alabama doing well, with expanding the 12-team playoff, some people might want to give another team a chance. So that's just my 2 cents on that. Last game we have right here on the dock is Washington on the road to face Penn State. Penn State is a 12.5-point favorite here, total 48. Buyback on the Washington Huskies is +400. What do you like in this one?
Penn State coming on. The only loss that they have this year is obviously to Ohio State. That was at home. Penn State at 7-1, currently sitting 6th in the college football playoff rankings. Again, this number, Washington's a weird team because I faded them this year in their regular season win total. I think it was 6.5, and I have the under there, so I'm still alive. I certainly don't need them to get hot at any point down the stretch. I feel like they should lose 2 of their remaining 3, which I think would put them at 6, if I'm not mistaken. But it's right up against it right now, the wire for me. I definitely need Penn State from our regular season win total here. But this Washington rating is way higher than I thought it would be going into the season. This Washington team of the Huskies, 6 returning starters. Their offensive line was decimated by the NFL draft. This is their first trip to Beaver Stadium. They are 0-3 all-time versus Penn State. Washington, 7-1 straight up, 6-2 against the spread in conference road games versus ranked foes, a spot they find themselves in today in Happy Valley. The last 2 meetings between them were 1-score games. And listen, this James Franklin thing, it was kind of funny. We, as soon as we got to this game last week, we both sort of laughed. And we were like, is it a big game? Well, we're not betting James Franklin. We're not betting Penn State. And we got paid for it. And until I stop getting paid betting against him in big games, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to bet against James Franklin. Is it because I don't like him? No, I like him. I think he's a great guy. I think he is one of the best recruiters in college football, quite frankly. He gets tremendous talent in Happy Valley. We saw, so what we talk about, it's not just a mystery. It's not like some kind of smoke in the air with him. Like look what they did at the goal line. Like that was they went power with a guard essentially in a wide out position, pulling and trapping. The whole world knew what they were going to do. There was no creativity there. They tried to beat a team, that big physical team with big physical. They didn't do it. Couldn't get the ball in the end zone. That's the kind of stuff. Now I get it. He's not calling the plays, but I'm pretty sure that if he turns to the offensive coordinator or goes over the mic to him and says, "Hey, this is what I want," he's going to get it. Yeah. So at some point, he's got to get over that hump. Again, do I call this game a big game? Not really. This Washington team nowhere near in contention. As I mentioned, they're hovering right around 500. Penn State has the higher rating here, but not quite justifying the point spread where it's at. I'm naturally rooting for Penn State with my under on Washington. But I mean, we saw that again last week versus OSU. If the Penn State talent level should take over today, quite frankly, the number is what it is. It's too much for me to take a bite out of. I don't like to bet into games where I've already got action in the regular season win total. I just kind of like to let those things ride out and then try to get what I bet to get done early in the year home. So pulling for Penn State here today. This is a team again. Can they hang on and I mean, can they make the national playoff? Yes, they can. If they end up facing one of the top echelon teams, will they beat them? I don't believe so because he's given me no evidence that he can do that yet, Dan.
Yeah, again, you're right. That the game you circled was the Penn State-Ohio State game, like you said last week, and again, he couldn't get it done. So now Penn State ranks 6th, Ohio State 2 in the college football playoff this week. Now talk to me about this, Ray. The college football playoff here, we have 25 teams listed. I have in front of me. Which of the 25 teams do you think is really doesn't deserve to be here? I can list a couple of the teams I think. BYU at sitting number 9, I think we might see a move. Boise State, right, at 12. I mean, LSU is at 15, and I think that can move. So a couple of these teams, I feel like we see a false rating behind them. Talk to me about that.
And I think a lot of that, Dan, it's going to be sorted out, right? I mean, there's still a bit of road to run. Listen, BYU goes unbeaten. I mean, I don't know how you keep them out, right? They're not going to be kept out. If they're currently at 9 and they run the table, I mean, they're going to be the highest ranked. I mean, they're in. I mean, if they run the table,
they currently have the first round bye. Actually, right now, they're currently ranked 4th in the college football playoff, but 9 in the country right now. So,
again, I find Indiana to be a little faulty but again, an unbeaten team. But they're going to have to beat, in order to get the automatic, they've got to beat Ohio State in the conference title game. That could be interesting if it does happen, or not in the conference title game, excuse me. They play, I think, next week, and I think that game's at Ohio State. I could be wrong, but I know that they are yet to play each other. So there's going to be a seismic shift with Ohio State at 2, Indiana at 8. Alabama, obviously, is playing LSU today. So that's your number 11 and 15. One of those is going to go up and one of them is going to disappear. They both have 2 losses. That's a win or die game. And again, being played in Baton Rouge, very, very tough spot. If Alabama secures that win, their chances obviously go way up. SMU is an interesting team at 8-1. They're sitting at 13th right now. So a lot of this stuff will sort itself out. I think, the ones that I think it's easier to say the ones that you kind of feel like are heading more towards the bye. So the ACC is going to have to send a team. It looks obviously like it's going to be Miami, but there's some other schools up here that are in the top 20. They're going to have a say in that. Pitt, SMU. So, to me, it's hard to really say. I think a lot of it gets sorted out on the field in the next couple of weeks. I don't really find any teams that shouldn't be where they're at right now. I think more it's just a matter of letting it play out. Again, like Alabama, LSU, we're going to see that big shift here. And some other ones. The Ohio State, Indiana game is going to be a big mover and shaker. So still a little road to hoe here, but I feel like they've And so I want to say they got it right, but they got, I can't sit here and really argue too much with where they're at now. And I think the beauty of the 12-teamer is that it's going to really sort itself out with head-to-head play. But I promise you, and don't ever be confused, everybody wants to keep expanding the playoff. There's 64 teams in a college basketball, and that wasn't good enough. They had to add the 4 play-in games. Pretty soon, what's that field going to be? Everybody's in? I mean, no matter what you do, whether it's 2 teams, 4 teams, or 12 teams, number 3, number 5, and number 13 are going to be pissed, and they're going to think they got screwed. So don't expect that this year is going to be any different because it's 12 teams. Whoever gets left out in the 13 through 15 spots will be saying that they're deserving. So don't think it fixes all that, folks. You're still going to hear that.
Yes, you won't get it. It's just you'll never get away from that, right? That's just human. Everyone feels like they got screwed, and they feel like they could screw somebody else. So, like you said, if you don't get too discouraged if your team is not in the top 25 yet, because like Ray said, there's a big road left ahead, and they could climb the rankings. And if you're feeling comfortable with your team is in the top rankings, right? Don't get too comfortable that they're there, because they're, like Ray said, there's a lot of road left and they could be bounced out. So all great stuff there, Ray. Thanks again for your insight for another college football weekend. We'll be back next week, and hope everyone has a winning weekend. Take it easy.